做美线的货代吗？
Freight forwarders handling US shipments really have it tough, sitting in the office, and suddenly tariffs skyrocket.
Recently, China's freight forwarding industry for US-bound shipments is filled with complaints, with many feeling like the sky has collapsed, business has nearly disappeared, and some freight forwarders have simply chosen to lie flat and give up. Mr. Wang, I just saw the news. The US is going to impose more tariffs on us. What are we going to do now? What are we going to do? Go to the next room, find a bed, and lie flat like I am. On April 10th, the US announced tariffs of up to 145% on Chinese goods, with some categories facing rates as high as 245%. On April 11th, China responded by raising tariffs on US imports to 125%. These measures have nearly halted US-China trade, causing a sharp decline in freight forwarding for US-bound shipments. Chinese freight forwarders report that rising US tariffs have increased logistics costs and reduced shipment volumes, threatening many freights and logistics companies with closure. Mr. Wang, a freight forwarder from Yiwu, noted that container shipments dropped from 80 to fewer than 40 per week, leading to the closure of numerous small logistics firms. To mitigate risks, forwarders now require payment before shipment, with customers covering tariff changes during transit. Ms. Li, an employee at a Shenzhen freight forwarding company, stated that tariffs have raised container taxes from 2,000 yuan to tens of thousands, accounting for 80% of logistics costs and intensifying industry competition. Many Chinese freight forwarding companies have ceased operations, resulting in widespread unemployment. To reduce costs, forwarders are combining high and low tariff goods in mixed containers to lower declared values for customs and minimize logistics expenses. The latest escalation in US-China trade tensions has triggered widespread closures of foreign trade businesses and devastated the China-North America container shipping market. As the world's largest container exporter, China relies heavily on the US market, particularly trans-Pacific routes. High tariffs have caused a surge in blank sailings, where scheduled voyages are canceled due to collapsed demand.
245%关税暴击
Brothers, a 245% tariff has obliterated us. US shipping giants are bailing, hit by a tariff nuke. This move's got the Pacific boiling. Major alliances are pulling routes left and right. Premier's Trio axed new US lines, wiping out 8,000 TEU overnight. OA's Big Four are cutting 3 LA routes by April's end, torching 42,000 TEU. Zim's halting China-US routes for 2 months. South China to LA fast ships are slashed in half. And Matson's Cox line, just quick. Ningbo to Long Beach in 18 days, done. Fast ship capacities down 20%. Freight rates are tanking worse than stocks. Shanghai data shows West Coast containers fell from $3,150 in March to $2,200 in April, a 30% dive. East Coast dropped from $4,280 to $3,200, down 24.6%. Jewelry says 53% of trans-Pacific routes are canceled. WeChat's buzzing. U.S. booking plummeted 67% week on week, with 12 sailings axed. Giants are jumping ship. Chip Express is dead. Matson's key routes are gone, and U.S. retail supply chain is reeling. On April 16, CNBC reported, citing HLS Group, that 80 sailings were canceled due to a sharp decline in orders. Since March, over 90 trans-Pacific sailings have been canceled, with more cancellations announced regularly. The shipping alliance, ONE, planned to rescue a route linking Qingdao, Ningbo, Shanghai, Busan, Vancouver, and Tacoma in May, but has indefinitely postponed this plan. Another route canceled its stop at Wilmington, North Carolina, reflecting carriers' efforts to adjust capacity amid market downturns. Alan Murphy, CEO of Sea Intelligence, stated, "We cannot predict how the sharp drop in orders will affect flight schedules, as there is no model to simulate this. But what I can tell you is that the vast majority of containers coming from Asia to the US are from China. While we won't see container volumes go to zero, they will definitely decrease, and we are sure to see a series of blank sailings announcements in the future." CNBC estimates that, with each ship carrying 8,000 to 10,000 TEU, these 80 cancellations could remove 640,000 to 800,000 containers from global supply chains, affecting port crane operations, fee collection, truck and rail transport, and warehouse logistics, challenging supply chain stability. Carrier strategies vary. Some reduce sailings to stabilize rates and address oversupply, while others maintain routes to capture market share. This divergence intensifies competition and may cause freight rate fluctuations, increasing uncertainty in the shipping industry. Market intelligence company Liner Latica's April 15th report projects a 30% to 60% drop in China's container bookings over the next 3 weeks due to U.S. tariffs, with Asia-wide bookings falling 10% to 20%, underscoring the trade tensions' impact on shipping. China's Ministry of Transport reported a 6.1% week-on-week decline in container throughput at Chinese ports from April 7th to the 13th, reversing a prior 1.9% increase. Major ports like Shanghai, Ningbo, and Yantian saw significant reductions, with containers accumulating at docks. Zhongze Chao, CEO of One Shipping, told Chinese media that U.S.-China trade has nearly stopped since the U.S. imposed 145% tariffs and China retaliated with 125% tariffs. Most goods cannot bear these costs, leading to widespread order and route cancellations. If tariffs persist, conditions will worsen. Zhong noted that U.S. market orders are declining rapidly, with ships limited to long-term contract remnants, e-commerce goods, and transshipment cargo like U.S. to Mexico routes. Without tariff relief, U.S. buyers may halt purchases, factories depend on U.S. orders could close, and freight demand will shrink further. U.S. liner data shows a 65% cancellation rate for U.S.-China routes in early April, with cargo volumes projected to fall 80 to 90% by month's end. A Xiamen freight company reported that U.S.-bound freight rates have dropped steadily. For a 40-foot high cube container from Xiamen to the U.S. West Coast, quotes fell from $2,200 in late March to $1,600. On April 11, the Shanghai Shipping Exchange reported the Shanghai Export Containerized Freight Index was up 0.1% from the prior period. North American routes saw reduced bookings due to cancellations, with rates from Shanghai to U.S. West and East Coast ports at $2,202 and $3,226 per FEU, down 4.8% and 2.4% respectively. The Ningbo Shipping Exchange's NCFI showed larger declines. The U.S. East Coast Index fell 10.8% to 1,100 points, and the West Coast Index dropped 18% to 1,222.1 points. Despite reduced capacity, oversupply continues to pressure rates. Liner Latica's report predicts that the May Day holiday will exacerbate May's shipping slowdown, prompting more blank sailings to stabilize rates. Some carriers are restructuring trans-Pacific eastbound services, signaling a broader strategic realignment to address long-term demand shifts. The U.S. announced tariff exemptions, including a 90-day freeze on reciprocal tariffs for all countries except China and exemptions for 20 product categories like smartphones and computers. As these high-volume goods are typically air freighted, their impact on ocean freight demand will be minimal. Liner Latica's April 15th report indicates that 30% to 40% of trans-Pacific container shipping faces tariff-related disruptions, severely affecting carriers reliant on China's market. For example, Hede Shipping, 100% of its business depends on China, with nearly all of its routes connected to China. The impact of tariffs has directly caused its operations to face difficulties. Matson, 90% of its business is related to China, with its Pacific routes heavily dependent on Chinese exports. The decline in cargo volume has severely impacted its revenue. Sea Lead Shipping, 82% of its business is related to China, and its capacity adjustments are insufficient to offset the impact of the demand contraction. TS Lines, 80% of its business is related to China, and it discontinued the AWC-2 service from South China to Los Angeles on April 14th. Costco Shipping, 71% of its business is related to China. As one of China's largest shipping companies, its trans-Pacific routes are facing severe challenges. These shipping companies, heavily reliant on the Chinese market, are facing a sharp decline in orders, frequent blank sailings, and falling freight rates due to the heavy pressure from tariffs. As a key export hub in China, the East China region is particularly affected by the blank sailing trend, with several major routes undergoing capacity adjustments, that are significantly impacting exporters' shipping plans. According to media reports, the cancellations on the East China to Los Angeles route are as follows. Evergreen's CPS route, from April 20th to May 11th, there will be a continuous 4-week suspension, severely affecting exporters' transportation arrangements. Zim's ZX2 route, the Ningbo sailings on April 10th has not departed, with the originally scheduled voyage delayed, and the specific arrival time is still pending. Additionally, expedited services have been canceled. Ocean Alliance's CPS route, blank sailings occurring on April 20th, April 27th, May 4th, and May 11th. Ocean Alliance's AAC4 route, blank sailings on April 15th, May 6th, and May 13th. Ocean Alliance's Sen route, blank sailing on May 1st. MSR, HMM, 1, and EMO routes, blank sailings on May 10th. As a key freight hub in southern China, Shenzhen Yantian Port is also heavily impacted by the blank sailing trend, with multiple routes facing cancellations or prolonged blank sailings. Ocean Alliance's CCMA route, blank sailings on April 24th. C3 route, blank sailings for 5 consecutive weeks starting from April 28th. CMA PRX route, suspension to mid to late April with possible route withdrawal. MSC Pro route, suspension in week 17 in late April with subsequent plans yet to be determined. APE route, blank sailings from late April to early May. Analysts note that despite recent U.S. tariff exemptions aimed at mitigating trade tensions, China's supply chain remains constrained as major industrial goods and daily necessities are not exempt. Consequently, shipping demand from China to the U.S. is unlikely to return to pre-tariff levels soon, and the shipping market outlook remains challenging. Vietnam and Southeast Asia are emerging as key global supply chain hubs. Zeneta reports that since March 30th, Vietnam's low to mid-range ocean freight rates has risen 43%, signaling a U.S. shift to alternative markets to avoid China's tariff risks. Spot rates from Ho Chi Minh City to Los Angeles increased 24% in early April as U.S. firms accelerate imports from Vietnam during the tariff exemption period. Sea Intelligence indicates that the U.S.'s 90-day tariff suspension for non-China countries ending July 9, 2025, offers a critical window for non-China suppliers. Southeast Asian and other manufacturers are maximizing shipments to the U.S. before tariffs apply, with European producers also intensifying deliveries to preempt reciprocal tariffs. On April 14th, Mediterranean Shipping Company, MSC, announced a peak season surcharge, PSS, effective May 13th for routes from Northern Europe, including the UK and Scandinavia Baltic region, to the US, Canada, Mexico, Puerto Rico, and the Bahamas. This addresses rising demand and market volatility. The surcharge standards are as follows: $800 per 20-foot dry container, $1,000 per 40-foot high cube dry container, $1,500 for refrigerated and special equipment containers. Drewry, a shipping consultancy, predicts that freight rates on major global routes may increase in the coming weeks due to reduced capacity and policy uncertainty. MSC's peak season surcharge reflects robust demand on Northern Europe to North America routes and indicates upcoming price volatility and capacity challenges in the global shipping market. High tariffs and declining demand have led to frequent blank sailings on ocean routes, while the U.S.-bound air freight market faces significant disruptions. A TikToker highlighted the challenging outlook for U.S. air freight.
美线真不好了，兄弟们。
Brothers, the U.S. markets tanked. April 22nd was K-Freight's last Dallas charter flight. No word on restarting. The vibe's grim, with Amazon FBA and general cargo shipments cratering. LA still sees some electronics, but it's light. Chicago, just e-cigarette bulk orders, nothing else. E-commerce is frozen. Many platforms will halt U.S. shipments last week of April to dodge customs snags. Word is high tariffs and small value exemptions are getting axed, gutting e-commerce even more. Platforms plan to pause U.S. routes starting next weekend. Freight rates flat at $2,000 for U.S., $3,000 plus for Mexico, but capacity shrinking and airlines can't cut prices much. What's moving? Electronics, servers, semiconductors, exempted stuff. Small packages and special lines are scraping by, slashing rates to cover taxes. Cargo volumes too low to sustain capacity, so some are rerouting through Southeast Asia. But watch out, U.S. customs are rejecting those containers over origin issues. No peak before May 1st, so don't dream of one. High tariffs have severely disrupted the U.S.-China freight market. The recent U.S. administration's decision to impose port fees on Chinese manufactured and operated vessels will further impact China's shipping industry. On April 17, the U.S. Trade Representative announced fees on Chinese-built and operated commercial vessels to bolster U.S. shipbuilding and counter China's trade practices. Following a year-long investigation under Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974, it was determined that China's subsidies and industrial control dominate shipping, logistics, and shipbuilding, harming U.S. interests. The Center for Strategic and International Studies notes that China controls approximately 20% of the global commercial fleet and 53% of commercial shipbuilding capacity. Effective October 14, 2025, with a 180-day grace period, Chinese-built vessels will face fees per U.S. voyage, $18 per net ton, rising to $33 by 2028, or $120 per container, rising to $250 by 2028, whichever is higher. Chinese-owned or registered vessels will incur $50 per net ton, rising to $140 by 2028. Non-U.S. built car transport ships will face $150 per vehicle, and LNG carriers must achieve 50% domestic production by 2047, starting in 2028. To promote U.S. shipbuilding, vessels must be fully manufactured domestically with standards stricter than the Jones Act. Exemptions apply to MARAD program participants in short sea shipping with a cap of 5 fees per vessel annually. The U.S. Trade Representative also proposed a 20% to 100% tariffs on Chinese container cranes, containers, and chassis, citing their 80% global crane market share as a supply chain risk. Public comments are accepted until May 19. U.S. unions endorse the policy as a step to revive shipbuilding, but shipping and import sectors warn of rising costs, consumer price increases, and port job impacts. This policy signals a protective phase for U.S. shipbuilding, reshaping global shipping and intensifying U.S.-China competition.